Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. And today we will learn about the release strategy in purchasing. I have divided this into four parts. In the part one, we will learn about the introduction to release procedure for purchasing documents. In the part two, we will learn create and test new release strategy for item-wise release of purchase requisition. Part three, we will learn create and test a new release strategy for overall release of purchase requisition. And part 4, we will learn creating a release strategy and testing the same for external purchasing document like purchase order. Okay, so today we will take up this part 1. Just, we will have some introduction to the release procedure for purchasing documents. Here, the release procedure for purchasing documents is divided into two main parts. First is release procedure for requisitions, and the second is release procedure for external purchasing documents. Here, this is the external purchasing documents. Coming to the release procedure for requisitions, first of all, we should know what is the purpose of this release procedure. The main purpose of the release procedure is to stop converting the purchase requisition into follow-on documents like purchase orders and outline agreements. Such purchase requisitions must be released by the necessary release authorities like procurement manager, section head, or general manager, whatever it is. Each person involved in the release procedure has to approve the purchasing document using his or her release code. An already affected release can be cancelled with the same code, in which case the original release status is reinstated to the black status. This means if a procurement manager example has released a purchase requisition, he can cancel it anytime. Okay. Then when he cancels it, again it will come to the black status. For purchase requisitions, two release procedures are available: without classification and with classification. Okay, what is this without classification? In without classification, the purchase requisitions can only be released at item level. Here we can use only the account assignment category, material group, plant and value of the item as characteristics for the release strategy. And in the procedure with classification, here we can release the purchase requisition both at item level or at header level. Now, how to release the purchase requisitions, which are subject to the release procedure? There are two ways. One is the individual release. Here, we can release the individual items of the requisition, and collective release. Here, we can release several requisition items or requisitions awaiting release by our release code at one time. To execute this transaction, we need only enter our release code and execute. The system will list all the requisition items whose release is possible with the relevant code. Now we have transaction codes to release the purchase requisitions. If you want to release purchase requisition one by one or individual, one requisition at one time, the transaction code is ME54N. And if you want to release several purchase requisitions at one time or collective release, the transaction code is ME55. This is about the brief on the release procedure for requisition. Coming to the release procedure for purchasing documents, again the purpose is same. Here the purpose is to prevent the printout or transmission of the documents to external vendors. External purchasing documents are released at header level only. Okay, an item-wise release is not possible. This means for external purchasing documents, we can use only the release procedure with classification. Now, how to release the purchase orders? Okay, are external purchasing documents which are subject to the release strategy. Okay, we have the transaction codes here. If you want to release, one purchase order at one time or individual release, we have the T code ME29N. And if you want to release several purchase orders at one time or collective release, we can use the transaction code ME28. Then to release a contract, we have the transaction code ME35K. To release a scheduling agreement, we have the transaction code ME35L. Okay. Then to learn about the release strategy of either a purchase requisition or a purchase order, we should know some important points. The first thing is release indicator. What is this release indicator? It is a key which is showing the release status of the requisition item or requisition. At the start of the any release procedure, the condition is usually black. That means if you have a purchase requisition which is subject to release strategy, initial status will be blocked because nobody has released it. Okay, and here the indicator will be yes, means blocked. And once the requisition is released, okay, it can have the indicator 1, which means that requisition can be converted into request for quotation, or indicator, it can have the release indicator 2. That means that purchase requisition can be converted into request for quotation, RFQ, or purchase order. Okay, we will learn about this, in detail when we actually, create the release strategy. This is I have given the screenshot of the release indicators. For example, if you want to see these release indicators, we can see here release indicator. Here, here the path is, if you want to see here in SPRO, material management, purchasing. Let us go to the purchase requisition. Then here, set up release procedure with classification. If we click here, we can see the double click on the release indicator, we can see here. Okay, so these are the indicators which I already just now explained. Block indicator 1, which is requisition can be converted to a request for RFQ. Then 2, that means the requisition can be converted into RFQ or purchase order, like that. Okay. Then how to set up the release strategy? Okay. What is the release strategy? The release strategy defines the approval process for purchasing documents using specific release codes in a sequence in which approvals have to be given. Okay. Now, how to set up the release strategy? Now, for release procedure for purchase requisitions, we know we have two procedures. One is without classification and other is with classification. We will study about the procedure with classification only, because here in this with classification only, we have the concept of characteristics, release codes, release group, and all that one. Okay. So that is why, we will study about this one in case requisition. Then the release procedure for external purchasing documents like purchase orders, contracts, and scheduling agreements are only possible with classification. Means here, we can release them only at header level. Now, to set up a release procedure, okay, with classification, I mean for purchase requisitions, we must make the following customizing settings. First, we have to create characteristics and class. Then we have to create the release group. Second step. The third step is create the release codes. Fourth step is create the release indicators. Fifth step is to create the release strategy. Okay. And we can also define a workflow, which is optional, which is not required. Okay. So now we will discuss these, steps in detail. First is step number 1. Create characteristics. We take it to the next page here. Characteristics here. A precondition for a release strategy with classification is that a class with characteristics has been created for each document type, or that is means for each that is for the either requisition or the purchase order. The individual release strategies differ by the value of the characteristics in a class. So characteristics, for example, here, let me go back here. Let us go to a typical, here, release strategy configuration. Here, edit characters. You can see here, procedure with classification, edit characteristics here. Okay, I'm just clicking on this edit characteristics here. Here, we have to create the characteristics, okay, which we are going to use for the particular release strategy. For example, here, I have one characteristic example here. Here, FRG EBAN work. Here, if I put this one and click on display or just press enter, we can see all these details here. This is plant, okay, and the character data type is character format, and the number of characters 4 here. If you go to the values here, we can see the characteristic value like 1000. The number of characters are 4, right? A plant has always 4 characters. So many plants are here. We can use add as many plants as we want here, like that. Okay. And coming to the more details here, we have, something like a communication structure for requisitions as well as a communication structure for purchasing, external purchasing documents. So CBAN is the communication structure for requisitions, and this contains all fields that can be used as characteristics for creating a release procedure for purchase requisitions. And the communication structure CEKKO, SECKO, it contains all fields that can be used as characteristics for creating release procedure for external purchasing documents like purchase orders, contracts, scheduling agreement, etc. Now, the characteristic must be linked in the additional data tab with the database table and field name. For example, here, let me go here and see here. I will show you what is this one. The database table CBAN has all the characteristics used in the release strategy of purchase acquisitions, and the database table CEKKO has all the characteristics used in the release strategy of external purchasing documents like purchase order, contract, scheduling agreement. Now, how to access this database table, CBAN and CEKKO? There is a transaction code ESC11 by using which we can go to this database table, CBAN, CEKKO, and see all the fields which we can use to create the characteristics. For example, I will take you to the SAP screen here. Let me go to this one, SAP Easy Access screen. Here, the transaction code I will go SC11, put SC11 here, enter. Here, for example, I want to go to the database table, CBAN, which has all the fields which can use to create characteristics for a release strategy for a purchase acquisition. Put here CBAN and enter. I click on display. Here we can see all the fields. For example, one important BSCRT. This is the field BSCRT, which is purchase acquisition document type here. Here. Okay. The next is, for example, EKGRP, which is the purchasing group. Then plant, the field, WERKS, and its description is plant, like this. So there are so many other fields also which we can also use, but these are important, fields. Okay, like this. So I have shown you this, some three, fields we can use to create the characteristics actually. And further, uh, we will see more details of how to create the characteristics using the fields in these database tables, like CEBAN for purchase acquisition and CEKKO for purchase order. When we actually, create a release strategy and test the same strategy. Okay, that time we will go into this one and see how to create the characteristics. Next is the next step is step number 2, create class. What is the class? Just now, we have seen about the characteristics. Once we create the characteristics, All the characteristics that are to be used in the release strategies for requisitions or external purchasing documents must be assigned to a class. This is very important. The class the class must be assigned to class type 032. For purchase requisitions, we have to use separate class for release procedure for item-wise release and separate class for total release of purchase requisition. We can give any name for the class. Okay, for example, here, let me go to the class here. Here, for example, where is the SPRO? Okay, here, go back here. For example, here, edit class here. For example, this, I have created one class, FRG underscore EBAN underscore total. So this class we will use for the release strategy for total release of purchase requisition or header level. Here we can see here. Okay, this is the class actually, and here we have a for the release strategy for the item with release of purchase requisition. We have to create a separate class. I have created a separate class like this. Name is FRG underscore EBAN underscore item. Here, if you go here, you can see requisition item wise release strategy like this. We will go into details of this one. Okay, when we actually create a release strategy for purchase requisition, that time we will see into details. Okay, we need to assign the class to the release group, and we must also specify whether the release group is for item wise release or overall release. Okay, we will see that one. What is that one? For release strategy of external purchasing documents like purchase orders, contracts, etc., we can use only one class because we know that we can release uh, external purchasing documents like purchase orders or contracts only at header level. Yeah, we we have to use only one class. But in case of requisition, we can either release at item level or header level or total release. That is the reason we have to have two separate classes. Okay, yeah. Then example, I have given an example here. FRG IBAN item, which is used for release strategy for purchase requisition at item level, which just now I have shown you here. Let me show you again here. And further here, these are the characteristics. Okay, so um, we have used, okay, for this particular release strategy for item wise release of the purchase requisition. These are the characteristics like FRG, ban, works, plant, EKGRP, purchasing group, BSCRT, ending with purchase requisition document type, then GSWRT means total value of the item in INR, like this. We'll go into detail, when we actually create the release strategy. Then the step number 3, create release group. We have to use separate release group for each release procedure. This means we have to create separate release group for releasing purchase requisition at item level, separate release group for releasing purchase requisition at header level, and separate release group for purchase order, release group for contract, like this. So we can give any name for each release group like uh, E2 for releasing purchase requisition at item level, E1 for releasing purchase requisition at header level or overall release of the purchase requisition, and release group ZP for release procedure for purchase orders. Then for release procedure for contract, ZC, release group ZC, and for release procedure for scheduling agreement, we can name that release group as ZL. Okay, these are the release groups. Generally, I'm saying. For example, here, let us go to that release groups and see here. Here, that comes under the setup the procedure with classification, which is for the purchase requisition here. Let me go here. We can see here release groups. Here, as I just now told you, right? Here, let me just a little bit scroll to the left here. Here, E1, this is the overall requisition group actually. This is the release group for overall release of the requisition or at header level. E1. E2, this is for the item-wise release of the requisition. Item-wise release here. E2. Like this. If you go to the release strategy of the external purchasing documents, we can also see the different release groups. We will go into that one in detail, right? When we actually create the release groups or the release strategies. Then we will come to the step number 4, which is the create the release code. What is a release code? A release code is a two-character ID that is assigned to the SAP user ID of the concerned person, like the purchase manager or general manager, who is authorized to release the purchasing documents. We have to create all the release codes with short descriptions needed for our release strategy and assign them to the required release group. Example, here we have the purchase manager X1, plant manager X2, and general manager X3. Okay, we can create as we like actually. So let me go to this SAP here. For example, here, setup procedure with classification. Here, release codes. Double click on the release codes. We can see here. We can see different. For example, here, this is for requisition. We can see manager J2, executive officer EX, okay, group leader J1. These are, sample actually, we can create, as we like actually. This is for requisition. And if you go to the release procedure for purchase orders, okay, let me go here, material management, here, purchasing, here, purchase order, release procedure for purchase orders, then define release procedure for purchase order. Double click on the release codes here. Yes, we display here. For example, we can see team leader, supervisor FR, purchase manager X1, plant manager X2, okay, and general manager X3. Okay, these are, I have given, these are the sample, okay, release codes, okay, for any release procedure. Here I have used it for external purchasing documents. Okay, so like that. We will see this all this, when we actually create the release strategy. Okay. Next thing is we will come to the next step, step number 5. Create release indicators. The release indicator is a key showing the release status of the item or document. At the start of the release procedure, the condition is usually black. Okay, so the release indicator shows whether the particular, that purchasing document, which is a purchase requisition or purchase order or contract or anything. Okay, what is the status? Whether it is still black, means it is not yet released by any purchase manager or any release code, or it, uh, or whether it is fully released or whatever it is. Here, here, I have shown you some sample release codes like yes means black. One release code is that is these are the release codes for purchase acquisition release strategy. One is means that particular purchase acquisition is can be converted into request for quotation, and if the status is 2 or release indicator is 2, then that purchase acquisition can be converted into RFQ, which is the request for quotation or purchase order. Okay, so let us see that here actually the release indicator. So we will see that in the release strategy for the purchase acquisition. Here I'm expanding purchase acquisition, release procedure with classification. Here, release codes, release indicators. Sorry. Okay, let me here one. Here, first we'll see blocked initially. It is yes means blocked. One is the purchase acquisition can be converted into RFQ. Two means it can be converted into RFQ or purchase order. Okay, that is what I have shown here. Okay, so I already shown this one. Okay, And further, we can see some more details of this release indicators here. For example, here release indicator 1, select this release indicator 1 and click details here. If you see here, we can see changeability here. Changeability. What is changeability? Changeability means that is here. If it is blank, then it is changeable. New release in case of a new strategy. You will see what into details of this one. Two means one means it cannot be changed. Two means changeable, no new determination of a strategy. Okay. Three means changeable, new release in case of a new strategy. Okay. Four means changeable, new release in case of a new strategy or value change. So like this, normally, we will keep it as a changeable, new release in case of a new strategy. Okay. So that means here, for example, here, this ID 1, okay, here if it is blank, then that is, this is changeable actually. That means we can change that release strategy at any time, and we will go into details in that one when we actually do the configuration and create a new release strategy. Okay, so this is about this one, and the other one is value changes here. What is this value changes here? Here, for value changes, we can define a percentage by which the value of the requisition may be increased after the release procedure has started. If the requisition is then changed and the new value of the requisition exceeds the old value by more than the percentage entered, the system issues an error message. For example, here, if you put the value here, value change as 40%, and let us say the purchase requisition is released. And now, if the value of the purchase requisition is increased, means after releasing it, if it is increased by more than 40%, then the system will issue an error message. Okay. And suppose if we put here it as here he's saying about 40%, right? 40%. Okay. Suppose if we make it as 50%, then after the requisition is released, okay, then we cannot increase the value of the requisition by more than 50%. Okay, 50% of the total value of the requisition. Okay. So that means, let us say, for 40%, it will allow only, if we can increase the total value of the requisition by 40%. Okay, suppose if we increase the value of the requisition by more than 40%, then the system will throw an error message. Okay, like that. And it will be black. Okay. Okay. So that is about the value change. We will go into more details of this value change when we actually, create a new release strategy. Okay. Normally it will be blank, but percentage of the value change can be used based on this business requirement. Okay. Normally any release strategy, what I have seen practically is blank in most of the time. But if some business process, right, they want to uh, update this value, okay, they can do it actually. Coming to the last step, which is the create release strategy here. Okay, so the release strategies define the criteria that result in the blocking of a purchase requisition. We define the following information for every release strategy. So to create a release strategy, we have to first create the release codes. Okay, who will be involved in the release process. The second is the release prerequisites. What is this release prerequisite? The release prerequisite determine the order in which the release points affect the release via their release codes. Okay, so example, the figure shows a release strategy with 3 release codes. For example, here, let us go to the release code, right? So we will go to, for example, here, we will, there it is, release requisition. Okay. For example, here, let me go to the double click on release strategies here. Release PR total release strategy, for example, E1. I will select this and go to this details here. Okay, so let us see here. So release prerequisites. For example, here, uh, if you see here, this release strategy YY means total release strategy of purchase requisition. Here the release group is E1. It has three release codes, Y1, Y2, Y3. Purchase supervisor, purchase manager, and plant manager. Okay, these are the three release codes. And here, what are the release prerequisites here? Okay, let us see what is this release prerequisites here. See what I will do. I will click on this release prerequisites button. Okay, so let me scroll to the right here. See here, we can see the indicator Y1. So for this indicator Y1, there is no release prerequisite. Okay, that means he is the first person who is going to release it, which is the purchase supervisor. Coming to the release code Y2 here. If Y2 has to release a purchase requisition, then what is the prerequisite here? Prerequisite is Y1 should release it actually here. See Y1, see here, we can see here, it is checked here. Here, right? It is checked here. Checked. That means for Y2 to release it, Y1 should release here because it is checked here. Checked here. Okay. That is the prerequisite for Y2. Here. For release code Y2, a release with release code Y1 is a prerequisite. Okay. So then this is implemented by checking the code Y1 as a prerequisite for the code Y2 here. It is checked actually. Here for Y2, here checked means Y1 should release it at the top. Here, what you see here, horizontal Y2 and top is the prerequisite Y1 and this top should be checked here Y1. That means for Y2, Y1 should first release it. Then for Y3, what is the prerequisite? Y3 is the general manager or the plant manager. Here you can see here in the left. So for the plant manager to release the purchase requisition, what is the prerequisite? The prerequisite is Y1. Here you can see here Y1 and Y2. Here Y2 should release the purchase requisition. Okay, so whatever the top you can see here, these are the prerequisites and their checkboxes are in the horizontal lines. Okay, for the particular release codes. That is about the prerequisites. Coming to the release status. Here, what is the release status? We specify the status of a document after it has been released by certain release point. We must specify the status the document would have during the release process. The first condition is usually blocked. The final condition is the list. Okay. So, example, in the below release strategy, YY, final release status is 2, which is PR is released to convert to RFQ or a purchase order. See, for example, here, you will go to the release strategy here. YY. Let me see here. Yeah, it is same YY. Here, release status. Here we can see here this. Click on the release status button here. Release status button here. Let me go to this here. Status here. Here YY. We can see here. Yeah, here. See here. For the release strategy YY, final release status is 2, which is PR is released to convert to RFQ or purchase order. So let me show here what is the final release status is 2 here. We can see here. See here. See here. If you see here the first horizontal line, which is blocked here. If you see here Y1, Y2, Y3 means nobody has released the requisition. It is blocked. The second horizontal line here it is again the status is yes, blocked. It is blocked here. Why it is blocked? It is released only by Y1 because it is not yet released by Y2 and Y3. Now the third line here it is again blocked because it is released only by Y1 and Y2. The fourth line we can see here it is 2, which is The requisition is released for creating a request for quotation or a purchase order. Now why? Because it is released by all the three release codes, Y1, Y2 and Y3. Okay, that is about the release status. Coming to the classification. Here we can see the one classification button here. This one. Classification, which is the third button. Okay, from the left here. Classification. What is this classification? This is very important in a release strategy. In the classification, we define how the characteristics play a role to determine a particular release strategy. This means which field values in which fields of the characteristics result in the determination of a certain release strategy. Okay, so here the field values of the characteristics will activate the release strategy. That is very important. Example here for the release strategy YY, the means here this release strategy YY will be triggered if the plant is 9110, purchasing group is M02, total value of requisition is more than 50,000, and purchase requisition document type is ZRNB. How? Here if we click the classification, we can see here the values. Okay, let me go to the actual here. This is it the same? Yeah, E1YY. Yeah, here E1YY. I will go to this, click on this classification. Here, we can see here. Okay, so that means here, if I create a purchase requisition for plant 9110 and with purchasing group M02, and if the total value of the requisition is more than 50,000 rupees INR, and the purchase requisition document type is ZRNB, then this release strategy YY will be activated. Okay, that is the meaning here. That is the meaning here. Okay. Okay, because this in this classification we will assign the values of the characteristics. Okay, which are responsible to activate the release strategy when we create the requisition of that particular plant with that particular purchasing group and with that particular value and particular document type. Okay, all these decide. Okay, how to activate whether to activate the release strategy or not. Okay, if the document type is the RNB with this value and this purchasing group and this plant 9110, then only that release strategy will be activated. If we create a purchase requisition for any other plant other than 9110 or any other purchasing group and different value less than this 50,000 rupees, that purchase requisition will not be subject to release strategy at all. That can be converted into purchase order and sent. Okay, that is the importance of this classification here in the configuration of the release strategy of either a purchase requisition or a purchase order. Then coming to the next point, release simulation. Okay, so this is just to simulate the release strategy. So coming to the details of it, the release simulation function enables us to check which status a document will have with this release strategy after having been released by a certain release point or release code. Through simulate release and effect release by double clicking on the release code, the system will display the status the document will have as a result of this release. For example, here, let me go here in. I am going to click on this release simulation button, which is the fourth button from the left down. Click on this release simulation here. Okay, we will see here. Here, we can see the final release. Means these are the release codes which are supposed to release that particular purchase requisition. What are the release codes? Y1, Y2, and Y3. Okay. Now, let me go to this document here. Now, let us simulate this release. Simulate means we will just, see how the release strategy works practically. I will click on this button, simulate release. This another pop-up will come here. In this pop-up, let me just keep it down here. What we can see here, We can see the release code. We can see the release options here. Release possible, release prerequisite missing, release prerequisite missing, like this. Miss here, what is this one? Release simulation here. See here, if I see the release code Y1, it is saying release possible. That means for this release strategy YY to start, the first thing is the release code Y1 or the purchase manager supervisor. He should first release the purchase acquisition. Okay, now what I will do, I will double click on this Y1. Now release already affected. That means release code Y1, who is the purchase supervisor, has just released the purchase acquisition. Once the purchase acquisition is released by the release code Y1, then here this will change to release possible. Okay, for the release code, the release, that is the release option, will change it to release possible. That means since Y1 has released the purchase acquisition, Y2 can now release the purchase acquisition. Y2. Okay, Y2 can release the purchase acquisition. That is why it is showing release possible. Now double click on this Y2. Okay, now this will change to release option, will change to release already affected. That means Y2 has also released the purchase acquisition. Once Y2 has released the purchase acquisition, the release option for release code Y3 will change to release possible, which means Y3 can now release the purchase acquisition. This is the final release code, or he is the final last person who is going to release the purchase acquisition. Who is the Y3 means with the plant manager. Now, if I double click on Y3, now we can see here release already affected. And here, this purchase acquisition can be converted into RFQ or PSQ. Okay. Now, I will explain it again actually. See, for example, I will simulate release here. Y1 release possible. Means Y1 can release the purchase acquisition because he is the first person to release the purchase acquisition. Double click here. See, before this one, Y1 can release it. We can see here the status is blocked because here nobody has released this purchase acquisition. Okay, now I will double click on Y1. So Y1 has released purchase acquisition, but still it is blocked. Now release possible by Y2. Double click on Y2. Okay, so Y2 has released the purchase acquisition, but still it is blocked. Status is blocked. Now, once Y2 has released, Y3 can release the requisition. Here, it is released possible by Y3. Now, here, now before Y3 has released, it is blocked. Now, let us double click on Y3 and release the requisition by the release code Y3. Okay, now Y3 has released it, and now the status of the requisition has changed to RFQ or purchase order. Okay, that means the requisition can be converted into re request for quotation or a purchase order. Okay, so that is, what I have explained here. Okay, once, Y3 has released, it is changed to RFQ. Okay, release, it is, once Y3 has released the purchase requisition, okay, that purchase requisition can be, it is released. That means it can be converted into RFQ or a purchase order. Okay, so this is, about the introduction to the release procedure for purchasing documents. Now, in the next class, okay, what we will do, we will go to the part 2, where, we will create and test a new release strategy for the item-wise release of purchase acquisition. And after the part 2 is completed, we will go to the separate video and we will create a new release strategy for overall release of the purchase acquisition. And finally, we will create a new release strategy for purchase order and test the same. Thank you for your time and meet you in my next video.